Ryan was a man who had once been a soldier. Many years had passed since the last war ended, and the colonies had moved forward with new leaders, new ships, and new cities on distant planets. But for Ryan, life had not moved forward. He lived alone on a forgotten lunar station that circled a barren moon, far away from the busy worlds of trade and politics. The station had been built during the old mining rush but abandoned when the ores ran out. Instead of leaving with the others, Ryan stayed behind. The station was little more than a collection of rusting corridors, broken control rooms, and silent hangars. Its walls were patched with steel plates that Ryan had welded himself over the years. Many of the lights flickered and some sections had no power at all. He had learned to live with the dim glow, the cold metal floors, and the constant hum of old machinery. Every day he repaired what he could and kept the life support systems running. It was a routine, simple but necessary. Food was scarce, but Ryan had his own system. He grew vegetables in a small hydroponic bay, using recycled water and artificial lamps. He fished nutrients from the leftover supplies of the old miners. Sometimes he received shipments from passing traders who still remembered his service as a veteran, though those visits grew fewer each year. Still, he managed to survive, not with comfort but with discipline. The silence of the lunar station was endless. When Ryan walked through its empty halls, his footsteps echoed like reminders of the past. He often stopped at the main observation deck where a wide window looked out into space. From there, he could see the stars scattered like diamonds and the gray surface of the moon below. He sometimes stayed there for hours, staring without speaking. There were no voices left to answer him. The loneliness pressed on him like the weight of gravity. He had once known the company of soldiers, the sound of laughter in barracks, the warmth of a shared fire on cold nights. He had once been part of something larger, something that gave him purpose. Now there was only the station and the long stretch of empty years. His hair had turned gray and his face carried the hard lines of age. He was strong still, but it was the strength of someone who had survived rather than someone who lived with joy. Yet Ryan was not broken. He held on to his discipline as if it were armor. Each morning he woke at the same hour, cleaned his quarters, checked the air filters, and walked through the corridors to make sure the systems still functioned. He kept records of supplies, updated his old logbooks, and spoke sometimes into the recorder even though no one listened. "Station check complete," he would say in a calm voice. "All systems stable for another day." It gave him a sense of order, a reason to keep moving forward even when the future was empty. On some days he walked outside. The lunar surface was gray and lifeless, but it gave him air to breathe inside his suit and silence to reflect upon. He would stand on the dust-covered rocks, looking up at the black sky and the distant stars. He remembered battles fought under those stars when fleets had burned and soldiers had fallen. He remembered comrades whose names were carved into memory. Out here there were no battle cries, no orders shouted through comms, only the sound of his own breath inside his helmet. Ryan was called a homeless veteran by those who remembered him. He had no home on Earth, no family waiting for him, and no fortune in the colonies. The lunar station was not even his bylaw, but no one cared enough to take it away. It was his home simply because he refused to leave it. To others it might have seemed a prison of silence, but to Ryan it was a place where he could keep living without bothering anyone. Sometimes, when the long nights stretched and the station felt colder than usual, he would sit in the mess hall with an old mug of heated water. He would close his eyes and imagine voices of his past, comrades laughing about small things, officers debating over maps, or a young recruit asking for advice. The memories kept him company, even though they also reminded him of what was gone. Years passed this way. The station aged and so did Ryan, but his routine never broke. He thought often that he would spend his last days here, alone among the stars, his body laid to rest in the cold dust of the moon. He accepted that thought without fear. A soldier accepts his fate, and Ryan had been a soldier longer than he had been anything else. But change comes when one least expects it. It began one quiet cycle, when the stars outside seemed brighter than usual. Ryan was at the observation deck drinking water from his mug and recording his daily notes. The station's sensors beeped suddenly, a sound he had not heard in years. At first he thought it was a fault in the system. The old machines often gave false signals, but when he checked the console he saw something that froze him in place. There were shapes moving outside, shapes large enough to cast shadows on the moon below. They drifted in formation, wings stretching as if they were not ships but living creatures. At first, Ryan thought his tired eyes had betrayed him. He rubbed his face, stared again, and felt his breath catch. They were not machines. They were not any alien vessels he had known during the wars. They were alive. They looked like dragons from ancient myths, their bodies long and strong, their wings vast enough to catch starlight. Their scales shimmered like silver, blue, and gold, glowing faintly in the void of space. 10 of them in total, gliding with a slow, weary motion as if they had traveled far and carried the weight of battles. Ryan's hands trembled as he adjusted the scanner. The readings confirmed what his eyes saw. They were alive, their bodies radiating warmth, their hearts beating like deep drums. His mind filled with questions. How could creatures like this exist in space? What were they doing here, so far from any known world? Why had they come to his forgotten moon? The dragons descended toward the lunar surface. Their wings folded as they landed, sending clouds of gray dust into the air. They stood together in a loose circle, heads bowed, tails curled close to their bodies. Some bore scars across their scales, long marks of burns and wounds. They moved slowly, not like hunters but like travelers who had lost their strength. Ryan watched in silence, his heart beating faster than it had in years. A part of him wanted to believe he was dreaming, that his lonely mind had finally created visions to fill the silence. But the scanners did not lie, and the sight outside the viewport was clear. They were real. 10 dragons standing on the moon below his station. He rose from his chair and stood at the glass. For the first time in years, he felt something stir within him, something stronger than routine or discipline. It was not fear. It was not sorrow. It was the feeling that the silence of his lonely life was about to be broken. The dragons had come, and nothing on the lunar station would ever be the same again. Ryan stood at the wide window of the observation deck, staring down at the 10 great shapes resting on the gray lunar surface. His mind raced with questions he could not answer. The dragons were not a trick of the sensors, and they were not visions born of loneliness. They were real, and they were here. For a long while, he did nothing. He simply watched. The dragons lay still, their wings folded close to their sides. Some lifted their heads slowly, looking around as if searching for danger. Others lowered their long necks to the ground, breathing heavy as though tired from a long journey. Their bodies shimmered faintly in the pale light, each scale reflecting colors that changed when they moved. Ryan's soldier instincts urged him to act with caution. Unknown creatures meant unknown risks. He checked the scanner again. Their bodies gave off heat like living animals. Their heartbeats were strong but uneven, as though some of them were wounded. The scars across their scales confirmed it. They had fought battles, and those battles had left marks. Ryan pulled away from the window and walked quickly to the control room. The station had no weapons worth using, only old mining cannons and small defense systems that had not been tested in years. Even if they worked, they would not be enough against creatures of this size. But his instincts told him something else. The dragons had not come as enemies. Their posture was not that of hunters or raiders. They looked like travelers seeking shelter. He sat at the console, fingers brushing the old switches. A soldier's habit pushed him to prepare for the worst, but another thought held him back. What if they were not a threat? What if they needed help? His eyes narrowed. Help was something he had not thought about in years. He had spent so long keeping himself alive that the idea of aiding others felt distant, almost forgotten. Yet as he stared at the readings on the screen, he felt something stir inside him. If these creatures had truly come here wounded and weary, could he simply watch them fade into silence? Ryan pushed himself up and walked toward the equipment bay. His old spacesuit waited there, patched many times but still reliable. He checked the seals, tested the oxygen tanks, and clipped a light to his shoulder. As he worked, his thoughts drifted to his past. He had once stepped onto battlefields without fear. He had faced enemies stronger than himself and survived. He had not done so by hiding. The airlock hissed as it opened. The cold surface of the moon stretched out before him, wide and empty except for the massive shapes resting in the distance. Ryan stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the dust. His breath echoed in the helmet, steady but fast. Each step brought him closer to the dragons. As he approached, one of them raised its head. Its eyes glowed faintly, golden like the reflection of a sun. The creature watched him but did not move. Another dragon shifted, its wings twitching slightly as if it sensed his presence. Still, none of them attacked. They remained where they were, silent and still. Ryan stopped when he was close enough to feel the heat of their bodies through the thin air of his suit. He stared up at the nearest dragon. It was larger than any ship he had ever flown, its neck long and curved, its chest rising and falling with slow breaths. A scar cut across its flank, dark against the shimmering scales. The wound looked old but deep. Ryan raised one hand, not touching, only showing he meant no harm. His voice, muffled by the helmet, came out steady. "I do not know if you understand me, but I see you are hurt. I see you are tired." The dragon's golden eyes blinked once, its head lowered slightly closer to him. Ryan felt his chest tighten. For years he had spoken only to himself and the machines of the station. Now, for the first time, something alive was listening. He slowly reached into the pack on his suit and pulled out a container of water. He placed it on the ground, opening the lid. The water glimmered under the faint light. He stepped back, giving space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon stretched its neck forward and sniffed at the container. Its tongue flicked out and it drank. Ryan let out a slow breath. His guess had been right. They were not here to destroy. They were here because they needed something only he could give. One by one, the other dragons began to move. They lifted their heads, their eyes glowing in different shades. Blue, green, silver, and gold lights shone in the dark. They watched him, and though their size should have filled him with fear, he felt none. Instead, he felt the heavy weight of trust forming. They were choosing not to harm him. They were choosing to accept his presence. Ryan spent the next hours moving between them. He placed containers of water from his supplies and released extra oxygen tanks near the weakest ones. He knew it was not much, but it was what he could give. As he worked, he spoke to them in his calm, steady voice. He did not know if they understood, but it felt right to speak. "You are safe here. This station may be broken, but it will protect you for now. I will help you as much as I can." The dragons listened, their eyes never leaving him. Some lowered their heads to the ground near his feet, their breath warm even through the suit. It felt like a sign of acceptance, a gesture that needed no words. When Ryan finally returned to the station, exhaustion filled him, but so did something else. The silence that had ruled his life was no longer complete. He had seen life outside, life that had chosen to trust him. For the first time in years, the station did not feel empty. That night, if night could be called the hours when he rested, Ryan sat in the mess hall with his mug of heated water. The sounds of the old machines hummed as always, but his mind was filled with the images of glowing eyes and shimmering wings. He felt a spark of warmth he had not known in a long time. It was not just duty that moved him now. It was hope. The following cycles became a new rhythm. Ryan divided his time between maintaining the station and caring for the dragons. He studied them through the sensors and through his own eyes. He noticed patterns in the way they moved and the way they rested. They seemed to take turns watching, as if guarding each other. The younger-looking ones often leaned against the larger ones, seeking comfort. He also noticed that they did not fly. Their wings twitched and shifted, but they remained grounded. Ryan guessed they were still too weak to lift themselves into space again. He wondered what battles had forced them here. Who had hurt them? What enemies had they faced? One morning, he walked again to the lunar surface. The largest dragon lifted its head as he approached. This time it made a sound, a deep rumble that vibrated through the dust. It was not a roar of threat, but a low tone, almost like speech. Ryan stopped and listened. The dragon repeated the sound, slower, as though trying to reach him. "I do not know your words," Ryan said softly. "But I hear you." The dragon lowered its head until its golden eye was level with him. In that gaze, Ryan felt something he had not felt in years. Connection. Not with machines or memories, but with living beings who had chosen to trust him. The silence of his life was broken. The dragons had come, and with them came a new purpose. Ryan did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew this. He would not let these creatures fall. He would stand with them as he had once stood with his comrades long ago, and for the first time since the war ended, the veteran was no longer alone. The days passed, and the old lunar station was no longer silent. Ryan had fallen into a new rhythm of life, one that no longer centered only on his own survival. Each morning he checked the life support systems, walked through the dim corridors to repair failing circuits, and then stepped out onto the lunar surface to care for the dragons. The creatures were slowly regaining their strength. The wounds on their bodies were healing, and their movements grew more steady. Some had begun to stretch their wings across the dust, testing the strength of muscles that had long been tired. Others stood tall, lifting their heads to the black sky as if remembering the freedom of flight. Rian felt something stirring inside him each time he walked among them. Their presence gave him purpose. His life had once been defined by orders, battles, and the bonds of comradeship. When the wars ended, that purpose had been stripped away. But now in caring for the dragons, he felt the echo of that old duty returning. They depended on him and he would not fail them. One quiet cycle, Ryan sat at the console of the control room. The old sensors scanned the space around the moon. For years, the readings had shown nothing more than dust, debris, or the rare passing freighter. But this time, the screen lit up with something new. Multiple signals moving in formation, closing in on the system. Rian leaned forward, his soldier instincts returning in an instant. The signals were sharp and deliberate, not random like drifting rock or trade vessels. They were ships and they were coming fast. He adjusted the scanner, filtering the data until the truth became clear. These were not traders. These were raiders. His jaw tightened. He knew the pattern well. Raiders traveled in packs, circling their prey before striking. They carried weapons, not cargo, and their purpose was always the same: to take what they wanted by force. Rian's eyes shifted to the viewport. The dragons lay outside on the surface, unaware of the danger approaching. He remembered the scars across their bodies and the heavy fatigue in their movements. Suddenly, the truth struck him like a blade. These raiders were not here by chance. They were hunting the dragons. He sat in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. For years he had hidden from the galaxy, living quietly in the shell of a broken station. But now the galaxy had come to him, bringing danger to the creatures that had trusted him. He felt the old fire rising in his chest. The fire that once led him through battles. The fire that refused to let him surrender. Rian stood and walked quickly to the equipment bay. His hands moved with the precision of a soldier preparing for war. He checked the mining cannons that lined the outer hull of the station. They were old, rusted, and had not been fired in years, but he refused to let them fail. He worked for hours, oiling the gears, charging the power cells, and running tests on the targeting systems. Sparks flew, dust clung to his gloves, but slowly the weapons came alive again. He also returned to the defense grid, a system once built to keep miners safe from stray meteors. He rewired the broken circuits, rerouted the power from unused sections of the station, and forced the grid back online. It was not strong, but it was better than nothing. As he worked, he spoke aloud, a habit he had carried from the days of war. If you come here looking for a fight, you will find one. I may be only one man, but I will not stand by. When the preparations were complete, he returned to the dragons. They lifted their heads as he approached, their glowing eyes watching him closely. Ryan placed his hand on the nearest one's scales, feeling the warmth beneath. Danger is coming, he said firmly. You are not safe here, but I will fight for you. I will stand with you. The dragons did not speak in words, but they understood. The largest of them lowered its head until its golden eye met his gaze. In that silent exchange, Rian felt their trust deepen. They were not alone, and neither was he. Hours later, the raiders arrived. Their ships broke through the black sky like sharp knives circling the moon in formation. Ryan's scanner lit up with warnings. The station shook as one of the ships fired a test shot, a beam of red light that scorched the surface far from the dragons. A voice crackled over the old comm system, rough and filled with arrogance. Unknown station, this is Raider Command. You have something we want. 10 rare beasts on the surface. Step aside and you may live. Ryan's hand tightened on the console. His voice, calm but sharp, answered, This station is not yours to command. These creatures are under my protection. Turn back or you will face resistance. The raider laughed, the sound harsh. One man in a broken station? You think you can stand against us? Do not be foolish, veteran. We know who you are. You fought in wars long past, but your time is finished. Hand over the beasts. Ryan's eyes narrowed. If you want them, you will have to fight me first. The comm fell silent, but outside the ships moved closer. The battle was about to begin. Ryan activated the mining cannons. The old weapons roared, sending bright bursts of fire across the void. One raider ship jerked sideways, struck by the unexpected blast. Sparks exploded from its hull, forcing it to retreat. Another ship dodged quickly, its engines burning as it looped around the station. The station shook as enemy fire rained down, striking the outer walls. Panels burst, alarms screamed, and dust filled the corridors. But Ryan stood firm at the console, his hands moving with the skill of a soldier who had lived through worse. He targeted another raider and fired, tearing through its wing. The ship spun away, smoke trailing behind. On the lunar surface, the dragons rose. Their wings spread wide, their eyes blazing with light. For a moment, they seemed uncertain, their bodies still weak from old wounds. But when the raider ship circled lower, the dragons roared together, a sound that shook the dust and echoed through space. Flames burst from their mouths, bright against the darkness. One dragon leaped into the thin air, wings straining but strong enough to lift. It hurled fire toward a passing ship, striking its engines. The vessel exploded in a flash of light, debris scattering across the surface. The other dragons followed, rising into the sky with slow but growing strength. Their fire lit the void, joining Ryan's cannons in a defense neither raiders nor dragons had expected. The raiders fought back fiercely. Beams of light cut across the moon. Explosions shook the ground and the station trembled under the weight of battle. But Ryan refused to yield. He rerouted power, repaired systems in the middle of combat, and fired again and again. Each time a dragon fell back, he called to them, urging them to rise. Each time the raiders pressed closer, he struck harder, his spirit unbroken. The battle raged for hours. By the end, half the raider ships lay in ruins, burning in the void. The survivors retreated, their leader's voice snarling through the calm. "This is not over, veteran. We will return, and when we do, neither you nor your beasts will survive." Silence followed as their ships vanished into the darkness. Ryan leaned back in his chair, sweat covering his brow, his hands trembling from exhaustion. The station was damaged, its walls scorched and its systems strained, but it still stood. On the surface, the dragons landed one by one, their chests heaving with the effort of battle. They looked toward the station, their eyes glowing with a light that was no longer weary but proud. Ryan rose slowly and walked outside. The dust crunched beneath his boots as he approached the dragons. The largest one lowered its head again, golden eyes meeting his. In that gaze, Ryan saw respect. They had fought together, man and dragon, and they had won. He placed his hand against the warm scales. "We are not finished. They will come again. But we will be ready." The dragons rumbled softly as if answering him. The silence of the lunar station was gone forever. In its place was the sound of fire, courage, and the promise of battles yet to come. The station groaned as if it were alive. Panels had been burned, outer hull plates scarred, and the defense systems weakened from the battle. Yet the station still stood, and so did Ryan. He walked the corridors with slow steps, repairing what he could, moving like a man who had not forgotten the rhythm of war. His arms ached, his body was tired, but his spirit was alive. Outside, the dragons rested on the lunar surface. They had fought with him, breathing fire into the sky, and together they had driven the raiders away. But Ryan knew the truth. This victory was only the beginning. The raiders would return, and next time they would bring more ships, more weapons, and more determination. Ryan stood at the main viewport, his eyes fixed on the stars. He thought of the enemy leader's voice promising to come back. He thought of the scars that already marked the dragons. He thought of the weakness of his old station. If he waited without preparation, he and the dragons would fall. He turned from the window and went back to the console. His hands moved across the controls, pulling up maps of the lunar surface and old schematics of the station. Lines spread across the screen showing tunnels, abandoned mines, and broken hangars. Ideas formed in his mind, ideas shaped by years of battle. He had been a soldier once, trained to fight against stronger forces. He would use that training again. The first step was to strengthen the station. He worked day and night, repairing cannons, building barriers from scrap metal, and setting up traps across the lunar surface. He rerouted power from unused sections, shutting down entire corridors to feed energy into the defense grid. The lights in many areas went dark, but the weapons grew stronger. He also prepared hidden charges, mining explosives that had been left behind years ago. He buried them beneath the dust in key places, creating traps that would erupt if ships landed in the wrong spots. He tested each one carefully, marking their locations in his logbook. The dragons watched him as he worked. Sometimes they followed him, their great heads leaning close as if trying to understand his actions. Other times they moved across the moon themselves, stretching their wings, breathing fire into the thin air and regaining strength. Ryan saw that their wounds were healing faster now. Their eyes glowed brighter. Their roars shook the ground with more power. They were preparing too, even if in their own way. One evening, Ryan stood before the largest dragon, the one with golden eyes. He placed his hand on its warm scales. The raiders will return. They will not stop until they have taken you. We cannot wait for them to strike. We must make a plan. The dragon lowered its head, rumbling deep in its chest. Ryan took that as a sign of understanding. He stepped back and drew lines in the dust with his boot, sketching the shape of the moon's surface. He pointed to the station. Here is our stronghold. I will keep the cannons ready. But we must do more than defend. We must strike at their heart. He pointed to the space above where the raiders' ships had circled. Their strength lies in numbers. But their control lies in one ship, the command ship. If we can destroy it, the others will fall apart. The dragons shifted, their eyes glowing brighter. Ryan felt a strange sense of connection as he explained. You will rise with me. I will guide you from the station, and together we will lure the raiders into the traps. When their attention is divided, we will strike their command. It was a bold plan, almost reckless, but Ryan knew it was the only way. The station could not survive another full assault. They had to take the fight to the enemy. The following days became a storm of preparation. Ryan built signal relays to guide the dragons in battle. He tested the comms, patching them with old soldier frequencies, hoping the dragons could learn to follow his voice. He walked the lunar surface again and again, setting markers for attack positions. Each step brought him closer to the man he had once been, the commander who had led soldiers into impossible battles. The dragons trained beside him. They stretched their wings higher, lifting themselves into the thin air, flying short distances across the surface. The sound of their wings thundered through the silence. They breathed fire into the sky, streams of flame so bright they lit the gray ground in gold. Ryan watched with steady eyes. Each day their strength grew. Each day they looked less like wounded creatures and more like warriors. At night, when he rested in the mess hall, Ryan felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. He was no longer a forgotten man keeping himself alive in silence. He was a soldier again, standing with allies preparing for a fight that mattered. One cycle, while testing the scanners, Ryan caught sight of something in the distance. Shadows moving through space, faint but steady. His chest tightened. The raiders were returning. He estimated only days before they reached the system. He stepped outside, the dust crunching beneath his boots. The dragons gathered around him, sensing the tension in his steps. He looked at them, their eyes glowing in the faint light. His voice was steady when he spoke. They are coming. This time they will not retreat so easily. We must be ready. The largest dragon lowered its head again, golden eyes blazing. Ryan felt his resolve harden. He would not let these creatures fall. He would not let the raiders take what had chosen to trust him. The final preparations began. Ryan triple-checked every cannon, every explosive, every relay. He loaded his rifle, an old weapon from his soldier days, and strapped it to his side. He sealed his suit and packed extra supplies in case the fight dragged long. The dragons sharpened their claws against the rocks, spread their wings wide, and filled the air with fire. Their roars echoed across the barren moon, a sound of strength that carried all the way to the station walls. On the last night before the battle, Ryan sat alone at the observation deck. The stars shone bright and the silence was heavy. He thought of his past, of comrades lost and battles fought. He thought of the long years he had spent in loneliness, waiting for an end that never came. Now he thought of the dragons resting outside, of the bond that had formed between them, of the plan they would carry out together. He closed his eyes and whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow we fight. Tomorrow we stand. When morning came, the scanners lit up with warnings. The raiders had arrived, larger in number, their formation tight and deadly. Their command ship loomed at the center, a dark shape bristling with weapons. Ryan rose from his chair and walked to the console. His voice was steady as he spoke to the dragons through the comm system. This is it. Remember what we have trained for. Follow my signals. Trust me as I trust you. Outside, the dragons lifted their heads. Their wings spread wide. Fire burned in their throats. They were ready. The raiders sent their message again, their leader's voice cruel and sharp. Veteran, this is your last chance. Step aside and hand over the beasts. Resist and you will be destroyed. Ryan's eyes hardened. He pressed the comm button and answered with calm strength. I have faced worse than you. If you want them, come and take them. The raider laughed and the battle began. The sky lit with fire and steel as the raiders moved in. Cannons roared. Beams cut across the void and the lunar surface shook under the assault. But this time Rian was ready. The traps exploded, tearing through ships that tried to land. The cannons fired in rhythm, guided by his steady hands. And above the moon the dragons rose. Their wings thundered, their fire cut through the black sky, and their roars shook the hearts of men. They followed Ryan's signals, striking where he directed, diving through enemy formations with burning fury. For the first time, man and dragon fought as one, united by trust and a shared purpose. The plan had begun, and the battle for survival was underway. The air around the lunar station trembled with the approaching raiders. Their fleet loomed like shadows against the black sky, engines glowing faintly as they closed in. The command ship led the formation, larger than the others, bristling with weapons and shields that could crush an ordinary station in minutes. Ryan stood at the main console, his hands steady, his mind sharp. He had planned for this moment, trained for it with the dragons, and now it had come. Outside, the dragons were ready. Their wings stretched wide across the gray surface, claws dug into the dust. Their eyes glowed like molten metal, fire ready in their throats. They were no longer weak creatures. They had grown strong under Rian's care and with his guidance, and now they were warriors, ready to fight for their lives and for the station that had become their home. Ryan activated the cannons along the station walls. The old weapons roared, firing bursts of energy that lit the void with bright flashes. One of the raider ships spun violently as it took the first hit, smoke trailing from its engines. Another ship tried to dive toward the station, only to strike a trap hidden beneath the dust. An explosion rocked the surface, sending fragments of rock and metal flying in every direction. The dragons roared in unison. Their fire lit the sky, striking at enemy ships in precise arcs. The younger dragons, once slow and weak, now darted between the larger ships, their claws tearing through hulls and engines. The largest dragon rose higher than the others, its wings cutting through the low gravity with powerful strokes. It focused on the command ship, breathing a torrent of flame that seared across its front shields. Sparks flew and alarms screamed across the enemy fleet. Ryan's heart pounded, but he remained calm. His hands guided the cannons, his eyes tracked the movements of each dragon, and his voice through the comm system kept the formation coordinated. Target the wing ships first, draw them away from the command ship. Stay with me. The raiders responded quickly, their fleet circling to flank the station. Beams of light cut across the void, striking the lunar surface near the dragons. Dust and debris flew as the young dragons ducked and rolled to avoid the blasts. Ryan fired the cannons in rhythm, each shot a precise strike aimed to keep the raiders off balance. The battle raged like a storm. The dragons, once wounded travelers, now struck with strength and skill. They moved as a team, coordinated by Ryan's guidance. Fire erupted across the sky as ships exploded one by one. Debris spun through the black void, glinting in the faint starlight. Ryan's station shook with every impact, but it held, a bastion of human skill and determination. The command ship remained, its shield strong and unbroken. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He had saved many of the dragons, destroyed most of the raider fleet, but the heart of the enemy still stood. He activated the final part of his plan. Hidden explosives beneath the moon's surface would be used to trap the command ship. He marked the positions, signaling the dragons to draw the ship closer. The largest dragon took the lead. It soared toward the command ship, its wings cutting through the thin air with power and grace. Fire burst from its throat, striking the shields in repeated attacks. The command ship fired back, but the dragon's movements were too quick, too precise. The other dragons followed, darting through the enemy formation, keeping the smaller ships distracted and away from the traps. Ryan activated the lunar charges. Massive explosions erupted along the planned path. Rocks and dust flew, striking the raider ships and forcing them into positions where the dragons could attack. One by one, the smaller ships were destroyed or driven away, leaving the command ship isolated above the lunar surface. Ryan's heart raced. This was the final moment. He spoke into the comm system, his voice steady but firm. "Now follow my lead. Strike together," the dragons responded. They rose in unison, wings spread wide, fire roaring from their throats. The largest dragon dove first, followed closely by the others. They struck the command ship from all sides, tearing at shields and engines. The station's cannons fired the last bursts of energy, striking critical points and weakening the ship further. The command ship shuddered, sparks flying from its hull. The raider crew panicked, unable to respond to the coordinated attack. Flames and explosions tore through the vessel, and then, with a final roar from the dragons, the ship erupted in a brilliant blaze. Pieces of metal spun away, vanishing into the black void of space. Silence followed. The raiders were defeated, their fleet scattered, and the command ship destroyed. The dragons landed on the lunar surface, their wings folding slowly, bodies heaving with effort but triumphant. Ryan stepped outside, boots crunching in the dust, and approached the largest dragon. He placed his hand against its warm scales. "We did it," he said softly, his voice filled with relief. "You are safe. The danger is gone." The dragon lowered its head until its golden eye met his. Ryan felt the trust and respect in that gaze. They had fought together, survived together, and now they stood victorious. The other dragons gathered around. They rumbled softly, a sound that carried warmth and pride. Ryan looked at them all, seeing not just creatures but companions who had chosen to trust him in a world that often ignored him. He turned back to the station. Though it had been damaged, it still stood. The cannons were scorched, the walls dented, and many systems would need repair. But it was alive as he was alive. Together, man and dragons had defended it, and together they had won. Days passed after the battle. Ryan worked tirelessly to repair the station, using the skills that had kept him alive for so many years. The dragons roamed the lunar surface, stretching their wings, breathing fire into the sky, and playing among the rocks. They were free now, yet they chose to stay. The bond they had formed with Ryan was stronger than the call of distant worlds. Supplies were rationed carefully, and Ryan continued to grow plants in the hydroponic bays. The dragons learned to drink water, eat supplements, and rest safely within the station's protective fields. Each day, the trust between them deepened. Ryan spoke to them often, his calm voice guiding and encouraging them. He felt alive in a way he had not in years. No longer lonely, no longer forgotten. One evening, Ryan stood at the observation deck looking out at the stars. The dragons rested nearby, their wings folded, bodies warm and calm. The black sky was clear, and the lunar surface glowed faintly under the sun. He thought about how far he had come, from a homeless veteran living in silence to a protector of creatures no one else had cared for. The silence that once ruled his life was gone forever. In its place was companionship, purpose, and the echo of courage. The dragons had chosen him, and he had chosen them. Together they had faced an enemy, fought impossible odds, and emerged victorious. Ryan smiled faintly, his hand resting on the window frame. The battle had changed everything. The station was no longer just a shelter. It was a home. The dragons were no longer just strange creatures. They were family, and he was no longer alone. The stars stretched endlessly across the sky, silent witnesses to the bond that had been forged in fire, courage, and trust. Ryan knew that more challenges might come, but he was ready. The dragons would stand with him, and he would stand with them. Together they would face whatever the galaxy sent their way. For the first time in years, Ryan felt complete. He had found purpose, companions, and a home among the stars. The lonely veteran of the moon had become a guardian, a friend, and a hero in a world that had once forgotten him. And on that quiet lunar surface, under the light of distant stars, Ryan and the 10 dragons stood together, ready to protect their home, their bond, and each other.